It is the day, the 25th of November, and version 3.0 of Star Wars Squadrons has released. Now, we covered this in the previous video where they made a blog post about what will be coming in Update 3.0 in November and Update 4.0 in mid-December. However, there is some new information that has come to light in this 3.0 update. So we'll be going over that information, the new Foster Haven map, the new characters you can play, the huge gameplay balance changes that have come to this patch, and so much more. So without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. Okay, so let's go over the big stuff. First up, Foster Haven is now a new multiplayer map. You can play this in dogfighting and you can play this in fleet battle ranked mode. We've had a few games in Foster Haven before this video. Now, they haven't changed as much on the Foster Haven map as I would have expected, but this map is completely different from all the others. Instead of working on a horizontal plane, where you've got your two frigates on either side of one another, the frigates are actually on top of one another. So you're actually working more on a vertical playing field. This is not done in any other map on fleet battles, and it's really different from how I usually would play the game. So I highly recommend having a few games versus AI first before going into rank. We'll cover more of this map later on in the video, so for now, let's get back to the patch notes. So next up, we have a lot of cosmetic customization, and there's some new stuff here that we didn't even know was coming. So first up, you got two new Starfighter paint jobs, Typhoon Squadron for the New Republic and Interstellar for the Empire, the latter which was inspired by the classic Kenner product toys. They also added the Vandal TIE Fighter paint job based on Sabine Wren's iconic handiwork. They also added the powerful Ally X-Wing, which was based off Luke Skywalker's swamp-sunken X-Wing from Dagobah. They added the Pantoron pilot for Imperial. As you know, we covered this in the previous video where the Star Wars blog post accidentally leaked it, but they added a Zeltron pilot for the Imperial. So that one I'm really excited for, but don't tell Eck on that one. Don't tell him. They also added the Venture set, which is a jacket, pants and gloves for the New Republic, the Paladin set, which is a flight suit, gloves and helmet for the Empire, the Navigator set, which is a flight suit, gloves and helmet for the Empire, and so much more. Okay, so we've covered the new map and the new cosmetics. Let's go through the balance changes. All I can say is rest in peace, bombers and A-Wings. So the morale gain for AI kills on defense has been lowered even further from 4 to 3. In the previous patch, it was from 5 to 4. Morale gains and losses are no longer scaled based on the number of players present on the team. So if you're on a 4v5, they were able to give you a bit of a bump in morale. That has now been removed. You also have the 4 new components, the boost extension kit, the prototype piercing torpedoes, ion rockets, and anti-material rocket turrets. I got to play around with a few of these before making this video. The boost extension kit is by far going to replace my supply droid on the X-Wing and the TIE Fighter, especially for the Empire. You're able to literally just hit a button, get full boost, and then power shunt it over to power. It's that strong, and I think a lot of people on the Empire are going to run it. For the New Republic, I don't think it's going to be as popular. Next up, you have prototype piercing torpedoes, and my god, this looks like it's going to be the most OP thing in the world. I mentioned in a previous video, the strength of these were going to be determined on how much damage they do to a subsystem, and I'm telling you now, these are going to get a nerf in the next patch without a doubt. We'll make a separate video on that. I don't really want to reveal it right away because I do not want the usage rate to be super high, so we'll probably make a video on that nearer to the version 4.0 update. As for iron rockets and anti-material rocket turrets, we haven't had a chance to play with those yet, so we'll just have to wait and see. But there is some nerfs to the bomber components. So they've reduced the maneuverability and turn rate of a bomber when utilizing the rotary cannon and auto-aim rotary cannon. So your maneuverability goes down by 60% when you're firing the cannon. When you're not firing the cannon, you go back to normal, but it obviously shows that they're not going to touch the damage on it, but it does mean that you're going to really have to hope players to stand still to have this be effective. I personally like this nerf. I'm glad they didn't touch the damage because I don't think that really addresses the issue. Many people who ran bomber didn't even bother using anything else but the rotary cannon, so this nerf is justified. And I'm glad they did a creative way around this rather than just moving some stats about. So the maneuverability nerf does pull away damage from player to player and put it back where it rightfully should be, which is against capital ships and flagships. So the rotary cannon will still be really powerful against your frigates, your cruisers, your CR-90s and flagships, so on and so forth. So thankfully they will still definitely have a use. The assault shield is also getting a nerf on bombers, so that also reduces your maneuverability when using it. So this makes sense because a lot of people are using the assault shield the wrong way around. So rightly so, it should be only used against capital ship assaults or starfighter jolting tools rather than an all-purpose component. What is interesting though is that guided burst cannon actually got a buff. At least I think it is a buff. Reading this, it is a little confusing. So guided burst cannon damage reduction was reduced from 35% up to 28% compared to its unguided variant. So rather there be a 35% reduction in damage compared to its unguided variant, it's only 28% now. So this is really good for some support players who want to be a bit more offensive against other starfighters whilst not necessarily focusing their lasers on, say, a capital ship or a flagship. So this is actually really good news for people who play support. The overloaded shield component got a buff as well, and a pretty big one actually. So players will now start with overcharged shields. I really love the overload shield component because I don't think the trade-offs are necessarily that bad. So to see an extra buff on this, I think a lot more people will run this actually. Because once the negative effects of having to wait for the shields to recharge is over, you're recharging a lot more shield per second than you would on a normal shield. So interested to see how that one will play out. Another huge thing is that A-Wings are getting a big nerf. Their shield regeneration rate is cut down by 1/3. This will force a lot of A-Wing players to pull away from the fight a lot more often. So A-Wings and TIE Interceptors tend to do a little bit more damage than, say, your X-Wing and TIE Fighter. The drawback from that is that you run out of power in your lasers a lot faster, and recharging them takes longer too. And whilst this does make sense, the TIE Interceptor works alongside this because it only has hull. You're very weak and fragile, you've got nothing else protecting you. For the A-Wing, not so much, because if you don't take enough damage to pull down your shields, you're effectively fine. That laser power drawback isn't enough to keep you out of the dogfighting, especially when a lot of players are running barrage rockets right now. So with the shield regeneration rate down by 1/3 on A-Wings, it's definitely going to force them to pull back a lot more often. And personally, I think that makes a lot of sense and will pull it back down to the same effectiveness level as the TIE Interceptor. There is also some changes to ranked as well. Matchmaking has been addressed as well as people leaving games. Although it's not too much, they've improved support for matchmaking between players with very different load times. So for players who have not finished loading when the match begins, will now have an additional window of time to join the match in progress rather than timing out on start. This definitely contributed to a lot of people leaving your game before it even started. So whilst yes, it was annoying when people were just leaving your game and you were on a 4v5, a lot of the times were due to the fact that people just weren't loading in time and got timed out. And for some people, they just didn't bother joining back, which sucks and you shouldn't be doing that, but it's understandable at least. Alongside that, when you win and lose a game, rather than showing a percentage of when your next rank tier is going to be, they actually show you your true SR points instead. Because it was actually kind of difficult to know how many points you lost based on the fact that you went from 74% down to 70%. Like, how much SR is that? Well, that has been solved. For people who are lucky enough to get themselves a PS5 or Xbox Series X, they've also added the next-gen improvements. So for the people who are smart enough to get an Xbox Series X, you'll now be able to play on 120 FPS or up to 4K resolution. But other than that, that is pretty much everything I'm going to cover on version 3.0 today. There is so much more that I haven't covered here, so if you want to read all of the patch notes, I'll put it in the description and in the pinned comment down below. But for those of you who are wondering why I didn't just add in everything, because there's a lot of things that just weren't video worthy here. I just wanted to tackle the really important things so I didn't waste your time. But other than that, I'm going to quickly cover over the stuff on Foster Haven. So the map doesn't have many changes. In fact, very minimal changes actually. They covered up the hole in the center, which I thought was going to lead onto the other side of the map. That's just been sealed up. And the flagships actually turn around the rock itself as it gets closer. The frigates and the cruisers are actually in the dockside area and are vertical, so one is stacked on top of another. Personally, I think this is a really cool way to add in new mechanics, new ways of playing on this map. It does leave the flagships a little bit more exposed and easier to get to compared to other maps. So for people who are running armor-piercing torpedoes, like, oh my god, this is going to be a really good map for you. There is also a lot of environment to be wary of as well, just like Nadiri Dockyards. So make sure your piloting skills are up for it, because it is not going to be plain sailing like SLEs or Yavin. But if you ask me, I think this might be one of my more favorite, if not my favorite maps so far. And I hope if any developers from EA Motive are watching, man, you got to add in more maps because this one was so much fun. But that is where I'm going to wrap up my thoughts, opinions, and all the balance changes for version 3.0. My question of the day is going to be, what is your favorite cosmetic and balance change added to version 3.0 and your least favorite balance change added to 3.0? Let me know all of that in the comments down below. I'll read all of them and try to get back to some of you as well. But other than that, I have been Charlie, you've been watching EcksToo, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.